Morning, everyone. Let me just say that I'm very pleased to have been asked to take part in this program, very important program, with some excellent panelists I'll introduce to you more formally in a couple of minutes. Just by virtue of housekeeping, I'm told that everyone should turn off their electronic devices, cell phones. We recognize the track sponsor, the law firm Danzig. We also recognize the AV sponsor, Redevelopment. I also remind attendees of the Twitter hashtag. I assume that has some meaning to somebody. Pound NJ Forum 13. You're now informed. Well, as I say, I was very pleased to be able to be part of this program. Very impressive to this point, and I suspect it will continue to be impressive through the course of the day. It's an important subject, and it's really designed to help us to try to cope with some of the frequent weather abnormalities with regard to sea level changes, with regard to all of the consequences of our changing climate and the problems that are associated with that. We'll also be talking today, and the panelists will share their thoughts with us, on how to assess and to prepare for the emerging risks that are associated with climate change. I think as with any other policy matter discussions, there are alternatives, there are modifications, there are different options that are available, and our job is to, as a society, is try to cope with making decisions about which alternatives, which options are available, how to establish priorities, how to focus on what is earlier done, needed to be done, as opposed to those things that can wait for a later period of time. I'd like to just tick off a couple of things that I think would be appropriate subjects for the debate that's going to be taking place in this nation as we focus on these types of problems associated with climate change. One is, are we primarily concerned with restoration or renovation? That is to say, are we going to go forward with rapid recovery opportunities to recreate what's been there in the past? Or do we have an approach to try to anticipate problems in the future and to restructure the things that we need to restructure in a way so as to prepare for those types of things coming? Governance issues. Governance issues are extremely important. How do we do planning at the local level, the regional level, state level? Those are the types of things that we have to focus upon. In New Jersey, particularly the role of CAFRA, which is a system that's been established, already in place, which could very well short-circuit the need to go forward and create whole new vehicles, perhaps or perhaps not. I've been doing a little bit of research in anticipation of today. I've looked at some of the systems to deal with things with coastal storm problems in Virginia, Maryland, and I just noted that there seems to be a higher inclination to provide for state authority, in some respects superseding local authority. That may very well not be possible in New Jersey, with our tradition, for the good or for the bad, of local control. It may be that we won't allow those types of forces to be shifted into power structures that are beyond the local level. The role of hard assets, bulkheads, seawalls, versus the living seashore approach, which involves dunes and natural organic and growth and beach restoration. Focus on mitigation versus adaptation. Mitigation, of course, trying to do something to avoid the consequences of things getting worse. Adaptation in the sense anticipating we don't know what's going to happen, but let's build for us to be able to deal with things that are happening to us right now. The difficulty, of course, I think between mitigation and adaptation is that we know that there are things that are going to happen inevitably now by virtue of forces that are already at work. But we don't know what's going to happen if we don't do anything to try to stop those forces from growing. The planning that we're doing now for what we anticipate may very well be inaccessible and incompetent to try to cope with the problems that are emerging after that. Beach restoration, or not, as the case may be, particularly with regard to changing funding formulas and more reliance or less reliance on local share and that type of thing. And then, of course, the ultimate issue of financing. Financing how it is that we're going to pay for whatever it is we start to do. What are the appropriate variabilities, the appropriate variables, rather, in the cost-benefit analysis? how do you fully fund the externalities, particularly the most objective externalities? Don't we feel good about the shore? Is there some gratification we get, psychic gratification, for making sure the shore is there? How do you price those types of things? Well, I just conclude with an observation, particularly brought home to me when I was listening to the last speaker, very impressive, the young lady from Washington, talking about infrastructure deficiencies and things that we had to deal with. I think at some point down the road, someone's got to address the folly of thinking we can do all the things we have to do as a nation under the existing fiscal structure that we operate from. The fact of the matter is, and this is obviously controversial, but I think it's appropriate to say, that to deal with the needs of the nation on not only an infrastructure basis, but in terms of healthcare, education, we really don't have a spending problem. We have a revenue problem. Funding all these things on infrastructure is going to take money far beyond what I think we're capable of raising under the existing system. I mean, we're the richest nation in the history of the world. We have 50 million people without health insurance. We have educational systems that hopefully will prepare us for the knowledge-based economy of the future. You know, we all know in our hearts that in some of the urban areas, some of the rural areas, our educational systems aren't working very well. So someone's going to have to start thinking, I would suggest, perhaps at the federal level, broad-based tax systems, BTU taxes, carbon taxes, VAT taxes, that will enable the federal government to start providing some assistance. We won't call it bailing out, we'll call it revenue sharing, to be able to deal with the things that we're talking about today and also deal with the other national needs that we have. So I think it's a source of some discussion that someone start lifting the level of awareness to the folly of the system that we have now and its inability, inevitable, to deal with the types of things we have.